Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. And Ayat in Cleveland, Ohio. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good afternoon, Tom. I would like to ask the congressman about this bipartisan bill that is going through, trying to pass through the Congress and the Senate, trying to criminalize people that are involved with the DBS. And I mean, they said it's up to $1 million fine and 20 years in prison.
Right. Are you familiar with this, Congressman?
Yeah, there was just an article that sparked this week. I haven't seen it moving, unless again this week I spent hours and hours and hours till midnight several nights doing markup for appropriations. But this is the bill trying to ban any attempts at doing the BDS movement, dealing with obviously Palestine and Israel. And I don't know if it's something that they're going to push next week. We have been told in the House there could be some sanction bills that may come up. This was not on the list that I saw. I think I saw something in the article this week. The Senate might have had either I don't know if a committee took it up or it was just an article about it. But I don't know, Ayat, that there's movement on the bill at this time. But I did see an article popped up this week, and I'm sorry I can't tell you more about what that article was. I just remember seeing it during the week.
Yeah, what I've read about it, and we discussed this some yesterday, is that apparently under this legislation, and I may be wrong on this, but this is what I've read in the press, because I haven't read the bill itself, which is very often almost impossible to do anyway. But even under this legislation, from what I've read in the press, even arguing in a public forum in favor of the divestiture and the boycotting of Israel over Gaza and Palestine and whatnot, just simply advocating it, speaking out, could subject a person to 20 years in prison and $1 million in fines. And there's a bunch of good Democrats who are co-sponsors of this. I'm guessing that somehow this thing got dropped into a bunch of members of Congress's laps, from a friendly pro-Israel source, and they just figured, oh, it's some kind of nice pro-Israel thing. Yeah, throw my name on it. And they didn't realize what it is, and this blowback is just going to freak everybody out. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is one of those issues, Tom. I've been taking a lot of heat lately from some of the extreme right so-called pro-Israel groups who have really a very, very political agenda, because I've sponsored things like working with the Quakers when they wanted a meeting room to talk about the plight of Palestinian youth. I've been to the region as recent as a year ago, and I can tell you we need to have peace in that region, but you need to have the conversations that have to go on. And when you continue to expand settlements illegally, that runs against everything. When I was there several years ago, we had just started the peace process again. It makes it harder to get to that place. And, I think a lot of the rhetoric that's out there, when I talk to the average Israeli or the average Palestinian, they don't abide by that rhetoric. It's kind of the government leaders like Netanyahu and some very, very partisan folks who fall in that extremist trap. Real people on the ground just want to see peace in the region, but we've got to get those conversations restarted. You can't continue to expand settlements. They've had some pretty serious prosecutorial actions against some players in Palestine that have violated, many of us think, civil rights, and we're just concerned that the efforts going on right now aren't leading to a peaceful solution. And I would argue, from my conversations there, if you want to fight ISIS, one of the best things we could possibly do to defeat ISIS is have a peaceful two-state settlement in the region, because if you do that, you take away one of the major talking points that ISIS uses to recruit people. So, it's a very tough area. People get very hyper-political. Just like I said, just working with the Quakers alone got me attacked and called anti-Semitic and everything else in the world. It's a tough region, and people politically get very afraid because people try to scare you, and it's a tough area for people to really stand up and say, look, no one's completely right on this, but we've got to get conversations that get us to a peaceful negotiation.
Amen. And it's the best thing for Israel's security, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think we all have said what we want is a two-state solution with the appropriate land swaps, right? I mean, that's kind of from both the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. The problem is the actions going on now are going to make it harder and harder every single day to get that done. And that's why we've got to stop any actions that make it harder to get done. But let's get back to that point where we can have that true peace. And if you do that, you will have done more to defeat ISIS than dropping the mother of all bombs or anything else that we do.
Right. Amen. Paul, in Round Mountain, California, you are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. I just was reading these articles about the Democratic, the DCCC.
Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee?
Right. Recruiting Blue Dog Democrats to recruit candidates for the 2018 election. These are people that are fiscally conservative. I think, and I just wondered what Mr. Pocan's reaction is to this.
Sure. Paul, and thanks for asking that, because I think, at first when I saw the article, or the headline, I should say, I reacted. I'm like, what? What's going on? This is crazy because, those are the more extreme elements of the Democratic Party, but that certainly doesn't inspire the base. It certainly doesn't get people who don't traditionally vote out to vote. And when I read it more and looked into it a little more, I think, honestly, this was more of an effort by the Blue Dogs to gain a little bit of muscle and show that they're doing something to try to help win back seats than anything that the DCCC is doing in an organized way, because I can also tell you the DCCC is organizing a lot of good progressives to run in some of these seats. And, when you look at someone, again, like a Randy Bryce in running against Speaker Ryan, you've got someone that the Congressional Progressive Caucus just made its first endorsement this week of, and yet they're also working very closely with the DCCC. So I think the misleading part is that I think the Blue Dogs wanted to get a little press to say, hey, look, we've got some muscle. We're not just in the teens of members versus the mid-70s that the Progressive Caucus has. And it's not so much about a reality of a shift in policy at the DCCC.
Yeah. Congressman, we just have 1 minute until we're going to hit the hard break at the bottom of the hour here. Not enough time to put a caller on. What are your thoughts on how the Democratic Party is strategizing going forward, and any advice and suggestions for our listeners about how they might participate and interact, things like that? Yeah,
well, I'm really glad that my good friend Keith Ellison is now the deputy chair of the party, and I think if people take and listen to what Keith is saying, which is building the party through the grassroots and, focusing more on getting people out to vote than just buying more ads on TV that consultants make a commission on, the better off we're going to be. But it really has to involve a lot of conversations now, not just at election time. And people can join their local Democratic parties, and if they don't like the direction they're going, they can run for leadership and take over those parties. So I think if we really focus on a grassroots party from the bottom up, which I think is what I see happening, because Tom Perez also is someone who was one of the more progressive secretaries under Barack Obama. We just have to make sure the party actually executes that and doesn't get sidetracked from people who may be in their finance divisions, and realize that the grassroots power is what financed Bernie Sanders' campaign. There is power to supporting that grassroots effort, and that's how we win elections.
Amen. And Tom Perez was in the studio yesterday talking with us. It's
awesome.
Seems like a good start, right? Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Middays with Mark. Your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan.